Hi, parents. It's Robbin McManne here. Thank you for listening to Parenting Our Future, which is in the top 0.5% of all podcasts worldwide. Before we dive into this episode, I want to invite you to join my membership site, the Parent Toolbox. You can join this membership for free. It's at www.parent-toolbox.com. And this is the companion site to my show, Parenting Our Future. In the Parent Toolbox, you will find game-changing tools and resources from both myself and my guest experts who are among some of the top minds in the parenting space. There are over 100 resources to help you navigate screen time, co-parenting, meltdown, teenagers, and so much more. Join today at www.parent-toolbox.com. Now back to the show. Hey, it's Robbin McManne here. Welcome to another episode of Parenting Our Future. I'm really excited to talk to Dr. Crystal Menzies, who's on the show today. And we are talking really about the richness of Black history. And I want to tell you a little bit about her before I start asking her all the questions. So she's a former educator in urban schools. Crystal drew and is drawing on her personal experience as an African diasporan history and her Guyanese African-American roots to found Emancipate TED, where she develops research-based educational experiences that center Black communities. Her flagship product, she draws on the stories of maroon communities, which are Africans who freed themselves from slavery and created hidden societies. And she does this to offer Black and brown families a model for how to navigate as liberated beings within oppressive systems. She lives in the Bay Area and enjoys reading Marvel movies, well, that we have in common, and daydreaming of Black futures. I love that, Dr. Crystal Menzies. Welcome to the show. I'm so happy to have you here. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
That's great. So, I said that we're talking about the richness of Black history, and I want to understand what you mean by that.
Well, I was a history teacher, and in the standards that I taught in California, Black history starts with enslavement. And I was actually just watching a TikTok video of a Black mother in Virginia, Makia Little. I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly. She was helping her daughter with homework and noticed that little blurb about Africans is like, we don't know anything about their existence. We think they were servants or slaves. She was at a school board meeting talking about this. And pre-colonial Black history, full of Mali Empire, the Songhai Empire, Mansa Musa, who was the richest person in history at that time. And the idea that there was no history pre-enslavement, and the idea that all of Black history is rooted in how others have treated us is, I want to trouble the narrative a little bit, trouble the waters there, and really just talk about how not all of Black history is centered around our trauma. It's also about our cultural production, our joy, we've built communities.
Okay, so what you're saying is that usually what we are taught in schools starts with the slave narrative. Yes? Is that what you're saying? And that actually there's much more to it than that before that. And so you want, so can you share a little bit of what that history is?
Yes, well, there's a rich history of empires in Africa as well. And so I'm thinking specifically of what Makia Little was saying. Like there's a epic, a name I love if I ever have a boy is Sundiata. It's an African epic, a la like Odysseus, and just full of magical realism, rooted in history. And we don't learn I didn't learn that till college. I didn't learn about Great Zimbabwe, one of the old ancient empires in Africa, until college. A lot of the stuff I didn't learn, a lot of pre-colonial African history I didn't learn till college. And then even when I was teaching US history, started with enslavement. That's it. Black folks were slaves. That was it. I'm like, was there anything else? Anything? And I knew there was because of where I went to school. And what I didn't hear were those folks who we call them self-emancipated Africans. So
Mm.
enslaved Africans who ran away from slavery and started free hidden societies
Mm.
throughout the Americas. So not the equivalent of running away to Canada and living free. These were like in swamps and jungles and mountains because they were adjacent to colonial plantation society. They fought wars, they built their own nation states, and we don't learn anything about this. So this is a little bit of what I mean, the richness of Black
Oh.
history. This is not coming from a place of shame of my enslaved ancestors. It's not that. It's telling the whole story.
Right. Yeah. And instead of focusing on the one egregious part of that history, which we all agree is horrible, and shining the light on some of this other stuff. Well, I mean, and I didn't know any of that. I remember watching there's a show that's on I forget what it's called. It's by the same person that is responsible for Downton Abbey, and there's some buzz around the show that they show affluent Black people, and
Oh, the Gilded
but
Age.
what's that?
Is it the Gilded Age?
Yes. Thank you for filling that in. Yeah, but also that Central Park itself was a thriving Black neighborhood,
Mm-hmm.
and then it was all taken away.
Yep, Seneca Village.
Seneca Village. Is that,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So who would have founded that? How did that come to be? And how did it come to be erased?
Mm-hmm. Well, Seneca Village was established by self-emancipated African, folks who were moved up north to escape slavery, folks who built homes and communities, for generations, and it was destroyed to build Central Park. And that, unfortunately, is a common theme throughout United States history in particular. I just came back from a trip from Tulsa, and people may have heard of Black Wall Street now. Greenwood Avenue was one of the most thriving, economically and socially thriving Black communities in the nation, and it was destroyed. It was a massacre, essentially, partly fueled by jealousy. They felt the Black folks were getting too big for their britches. They weren't staying in their place. And so a white mob using planes just like bombed and set fires to Greenwood Avenue. I want to say, don't quote me on the number, but it was at least 32 blocks were destroyed. And I knew that narrative. Didn't know is they rebuilt, and then urban renewal came, building all the highways and infrastructure. They built the freeway right through the rebuilt Greenwood Avenue. Same thing in Treme in New Orleans, one of the oldest free Black neighbor in the nation, built the freeway right through it. So usually if there's a freeway or a giant canal that's been dug through, it's probably been dug through a Black neighborhood, and or, depending on where you are in the country, an indigenous community or a Latina community.
Oh.
So yes.
Wow.
And it's interesting because it's like, okay, we rebuilt the resilience, and then bam, another thing comes.
Mm.
And part of the reason I do this work is because I need to remind myself, one, how daunting the task is, and how we continue to thrive despite this. Like, we are a persistent people, and that's the narrative, again, the whole story I want to be told.
Yeah, I love that. The resilience, the resourcefulness, that is incredible. It's incredible. It's wow. What a rich history, really. That is incredible, devastating and incredible. And but that's the point, is that you want it to not only be tied to your trauma, tied to the trauma of the community of, yeah. So how do you help? So I want to sort of ask you a question about what's happening in schools, right? So the current school environment, as you say it really trains Black and brown youth to see themselves through a deficit. So what is it that your work does to help to transform that?
Mm-hmm. Well, I noticed, one, the history that we're teaching, again, only enslavement, no resistance, no resilience, nothing, even though all of that existed. And two, when I left the classroom, Oh, and one, the narrative about like students and test scores. Like you very rarely in the broader narrative hear about like Black student achievement and thriving. It's
Mm.
always positioned as a problem. Black folks are always positioned as a problem to be solved. I think, I wish I could remember. Was it Richard Wright or somebody came up to Du Bois or Richard Wright or somebody? I wish I could quote this directly and said, how does it feel to be a problem? And like always viewing Black folks and Black students in particular as a problem. And so that's how I felt when I was in my doctoral program, where even from researchers who were trying to show the systemic structural issues that impact Black schooling, it was always framed, Black students were framed of, and this just is why they can't succeed and why they don't this and why they don't that. Where I went to Spelman, a historically Black college, where all I saw was Black achievement and success. And I was like, this isn't telling the whole story. So for my dissertation, I wanted to look at Black students from low-income communities who were academically thriving and like why that was, and came across this framework called community cultural wealth. So they were leveraging their community cultural wealth in academic institutions to be successful. And I wanted to position, again, the Black student as their experience as an assets-based experience instead of these poor, dear, unfortunate souls that we need to parachute in and help. And I didn't realize this was a connection all throughout my life until recently, the same with my Maroon communities work. So as I mentioned, I think Maroon communities were self-emancipated folks who started their own hit societies. Okay. And I realized that the way Black history is taught, again, is always centered on trauma. And I'm not saying ignore those pieces, but again, tell the full story. So I wanted to position Black folks and African folks in the diaspora spreading out of people. So if we talk about African diaspora, talking about Black people everywhere. So yes. In the case of enslavement, it's, North America, Central America, South America, Caribbean.
And where everybody, so they start from one place, but where they end up, where they move to throughout the world.
Yeah, just moving throughout the world. Right. Or being taken throughout the world. So I wanted to show if we're looking at the Black experience from an asset-based lens, who are those communities we can go to show how we've created thriving, free spaces despite what was going on around us. And Maroon communities are diverse. There's not one type of Maroon community. Sometimes they were large nation states, like Palmares in Brazil at its height was about 30,000 people. King Zumbi, their leader, was very much slavery needs to be wiped off the face of the earth. And so he had a scorched earth policy of like, I'm just going to burn all the plantations down, fought legit wars with the Portuguese and the Dutch. Same with Queen Nanny in Jamaica. So there were lots of women Maroon leaders too. Sometimes their names are kind of squashed down in history, but Dandara was another one from Palmares.
I love that. I love that there were women. I don't love that it was been buried, but that's incredible. Wow.
If you speak to any Jamaican, I will say Jamaicans know their Maroon history and they all know Queen Nanny. And she also had a scorched earth policy. She was like, we need to get rid of enslavement, and fought massive wars against the British. There was a point in Jamaican history where Maroons controlled the entire eastern side of the island.
Really? Well, this is incredible. Wow. Really fascinating. Can we go back to community cultural wealth? This is where you say that you see excellence in Black students, right? And that they're drawing upon this community cultural wealth. Can you just explain that a little bit more? Like, what is that? And, how do people sort of access that or become a part of that?
So community cultural wealth comes from the scholarship of Tara J. Yoso, a Latina scholar. And she said that marginalized communities have cultural capital that's not recognized in the research or by institutions. And she specifically identifies 6 types of cultural capital: aspirational capital, familial capital, linguistic capital, social capital, navigational capital, and resistant capital. And so and students from marginalized communities are coming in to the classrooms, to education spaces, just living their lives with this type of capital, but it's not recognized in them. And
Okay.
so my work is to empirically show, like, this is what it could look like. Or this is what it looks like in action. So my dissertation was observing and interviewing students to see how they were activating their community cultural wealth in different spaces.
Interesting.
My current research is about how Black students are activating their community cultural wealth in rigorous mathematics classrooms, and how teachers can cultivate and leverage student community cultural wealth.
Wow. That's great. And so is this specifically something that Black students are taught, or is this something that is taught in the whole classroom? Or is it just specific to Black students? I'm just curious, because what my thought is that what's good for a Black student is good for everybody, right? Because we all need to know and learn and recognize that there are that there is value there.
Mm-hmm. It's something that exists within all, from Yosel's perception, all marginalized communities. And her work focused on Latinx students and has applied to Black students as well. Like in my research, she's also talked about Black student experiences, and there's other scholars. But it's not at this stage. I would like it to be taught to students. It's more like a lens. You know, I wear glasses. For those who aren't watching, pointing to my glasses.
That's right. Yeah.
A lens to view students. Like, instead of they're coming in as blank slates, or they're coming in with these horrible home cultures. It's like the assumption that my students off the bat have this type of capital. I'm thinking of as a teacher. And so how do we cultivate and leverage this capital? Because the assumption, my theoretical assumption, and others as well, is that it's there. We just have to tap into it on the teacher end.
I see.
And then on the student end, I wanted to show what it looks like when students are activating aspirational capital in a classroom, or familial capital in a classroom.
Okay. Gotcha. Okay. So essentially what you're saying is, okay, we need to not look at this poor, unfortunate soul as we need to stop looking at them like that. We need to stop even thinking that and say, actually, this person, this student has this aspirational capital within this community that actually we can tap into to show them how great they are, to show them the gifts that they bring, that matters too. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes,
and so those 6 areas are aspirational, familial, linguistic, social, and there was 2 other that I didn't catch because I was furiously writing it down.
That's a lot. Navigational capital and resistant capital.
And so to sort of take some of these and break them apart a little bit, resistant capital just means, as it sounds, like what their ancestors resisted and rose up against. Is that correct?
That's part of it. And also, when, like, what I'm seeing in a lot of my research is Black students intentionally rebutting stereotypes. And so, like, I'm going to achieve specifically because you don't think I will.
I love it. Yeah. Yeah.
You said I'm not going to make it. I'm going to show you.
Big middle finger. Yeah. And then what is linguistic?
So this varies. So cultural assets come from the community. So like in Latinx communities, for example, we'd see just bilingualism or multilingualism. For Black students, AAVE is a separate, people call it a dialect, but it does have its own like language structures. So that ability to code switch between different linguistic styles, different communication styles, being able to take this content over here and translated into like more youth culture content would be like an example of linguistic capital.
Okay. Okay. That makes sense. And really, we should really look at it like a dialect. You think? Yeah. Yeah.
I say
Not,
more like a
not
language,
lesser.
but
Just,
I'm not a linguist, so
yeah. Yeah. I know. We're
yeah.
just talking though. We're just talking.
Yeah.
And
I know, as the academic, I'm like, I don't want a scholar reaching out. Well, actually.
yeah. Yeah. And meanwhile, I'm like, oh, let's just go with this. No, but I want to get it right too. It's important for me to get it right. And I know that, look, we as a society have to look at this too, right? We need to reframe what we're saying, what we're looking at. And it cannot be always white people rescuing, because that's you don't want that anyway,
Right.
yeah, you got your own strength and assets and history of being strong and powerful, and that's what I'm hearing you say. That's really what I'm hearing you say. And I love that there is that positive spin on it, that it's empowering. It's really like, to sound kind of corny, taking your power back. Like, no,
Yes.
don't look at me
Very
like this. Look at what not only I can do, what my family can do, has done, and what my ancestors have done. It's pretty proud of who I am, actually. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Right? Yeah, that's what
Yeah.
you want. I love that. That's really, that is exciting. Okay. So what are some activities that parents can do with their kids to help them be more proud of who they are and where they come from?
Well, I created a hidden history card deck that tells the
Oh,
stories of Maroon communities, because my own personal journey after my doctorate into the nonprofit space, ed reform nonprofits. So these aren't the same as grassroots nonprofits.
okay.
They kind of come from outside of the community, and had some pretty, the work we did was amazing, but had some pretty negative experiences and organizations that were using a lot of like, we're anti-racist, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, are we really? And not just me, other folks. And then I went to another job where it was the same old, same old. And I was like, wow, where can I go? I started to feel depressed, because I'm trying to be a better human. Where can I go? I don't expect us to achieve like the state of nirvana, anti-racist nirvana, but like, where can we be on an authentic journey
Yes,
towards
okay.
these liberatory principles? And I was like, wait a minute. So as a history major in undergrad, Maroon communities provide a framework for how to be a free person in the midst of an oppressive society.
Yes.
So I created, as a teacher, created this whole framework on how to become a Maroon. First you have an awakening, like the status quo is not what it should be, especially those who were born into enslavement. You're definitely taught, from religion to society structure, that this is the status of Africans in the world. This is how God made it. And you realize like, no, I don't really know about that. Then you take the active steps to liberate yourself. Then you have to negotiate freedom. Like, what are you willing to give up in order to maintain your freedom? Because plantation society saw Maroons as an existential and physical threat. So they were always trying to invade them and conquer them. Sometimes there were outright wars. Sometimes there were treaties signed that we might be like, did we really have to do that? But meaning, like, so one treaty, for example, if some Maroon communities agreed to return any new runaways in exchange to like not be invaded. So it's not a good, it's not something we look at as a good thing. And they had to deal with the realities of where they were faced. Now, typically Maroons would break these treaties and still keep the people anyway. And then there's like, who are we as a free people, like kind of this nation building state. And I created this whole framework, and my friend, another history major who's a teacher turned nonprofit worker, it's like, this is great, but nobody even knows who Maroons are. I was like, oh, you're right. So
Yeah.
I created the history card deck so people can get an idea of who Maroons are. So it's 3 sections: important ideas, so self-defense, self-determination, spirituality, and kinship, integral to Maroon societies, and then some important Maroon folks, and then some important Maroon communities. This does not cover all of them. There's a lot. And it's just to give a little taste of who Maroons are at their core, and like what they are, beliefs, and some important communities.
Right.
And then also from there, was like, cards aren't enough. Like they raise awareness, but really, how do we all reconnect to our own stories of resistance, of resilience? And so created a curriculum. It's called the Emancipated Experience, that uses the cards as a jumping off point for us to reconnect with our family stories, our local place-based stories, especially, during the pandemic. I feel like a lot of us became more isolated.
Definitely.
And some of us may have moved, and then it's like, oh, wait, I don't actually have community here. So the activities are designed for self-reflection, familial reflection, like learning our family stories. And then there's always an activity like to go out in your community and meet someone. It's specific, not just go randomly to play, but like maybe find a Black-owned bookstore, find a Black-owned coffee shop. And I center Black folks, but all of these, and I would love folks to all learn about the Black histories in their places, and also reconnect, if you aren't Black, with your own family's histories and family stories and other communities. So, and it's designed to be intergenerational.
Oh, wow. So it's really about like, let's start having the conversation. Let's start looking at this. Let's start learning about this and being curious about this. Yeah, that's about these maroon communities. So, and you've given us in the parent toolbox your emancipated book list. So if you are interested in learning more, you do have resources for people to read, to look at, to learn more about this history. And I think this is important for everybody to learn about this, right? Every community to learn about this, because it's a shared history, right? What happened in North America and in the world, right? I mean, I'm half German, right? So, I mean, I came from somewhere else, my ancestors came from somewhere else, right? I'm half German, half Scottish. So, I didn't start out here. So there's rich history everywhere, right? So I really like that. And I'm so grateful to you and to your work for helping to reframe this and helping not just Black students discover the excellence that is within them, but also to help the greater community see each other in a much different way and honor their past, good and bad. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for this conversation. I really appreciate it. So people can find you at emancipatededucation.com, and you are on Instagram, you're on TikTok, and you're TikTok at emancipated_ed. Or emancipate_ed, sorry. And then LinkedIn, you're at Crystal Menzies, PhD. So people can find you anywhere. And I just want to thank you so much again for this conversation. I've learned things that I didn't know before. And that is always my objective, is to bring guests like you to just help us understand things in a different way as it all relates to parenting, as we can all be better parents and better students of this world and just better humans. So I hope that everybody listening has felt this way. So thank you so much. And don't forget to go to the toolbox, parent-toolbox.com, and you can get Crystal's list of books to help you continue your journey and your learning as well. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to this edition of my podcast, Parenting Our Future. I'm parent coach Robbin McManne, and if you're enjoying this podcast, please share it with someone who you think might also need to hear this message. And don't forget to subscribe, and if you like my work, I would be grateful if you gave me a 5-star rating. For those of you who like my content and want more, visit me at yellingcurebook.com to get your copy of my book and to find other resources to help you. Until next time, I am wishing you and your family peace and connection.